Yeah, because typically I'm looking for these things to be like 2-hour meetings at most anyway. Good morning, all. Welcome to the Special Committee on Commissions and Committees. Uh, I'm Representative Fatusik. Representative is out in Spain celebrating Cinco de Mayo and a wedding. So, to get started, I'd like to do a little housekeeping. Housekeeping. Uh, we have been remiss in the fact that we do not have a committee clerk. And I would like to add, well, Representative Rambo is not here yet. And did she notify anybody that she was not going to be here?
Not me. She may be coming.
I think she,
know Representative Wilhelm is.
I know, I got a text from Representative Wilhelm. I have to remember, I can't call him Matt in meeting. Okay, I have to be formal. And yes, I'm going to ask Representative Rambo to be our committee clerk. And I would hope she would say yes. That's the first bit of housekeeping. The second bit of housekeeping is the next two meetings will start at 1 p.m. They will hopefully be finished by 3 p.m. Because for me to make morning meetings, as you have already seen, is tough for me because I have other things going on. Excellent. Okay, so in order to make that official, we have to have a clerk who takes notes. So, all right, we are here today primarily to, there we are. Hi, Representative. That's fine. I was advised that you might be a touch late, but that's okay. And I'm going to ask you if you would consider being our committee clerk. So, thank you. We appreciate that. Do we have to vote on that? No? Okay, you are duly appointed. Thank you. Okay, our meetings from now on are going to be the next two are going to be at 1 o'clock on Monday, not in the morning. Because a lot of us have way other stuff. And some of us that are as old as me, it takes a while to get that motor running Monday morning. So, okay, one of our primary purposes today is to have Dave Aluconis enlighten us and try to help us come up with a framework for the drafting attorneys to help them get through all the knot holes that they have to get through. So Dave, I know you said you had some information for us, so it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have brought with me today two of our drafting attorneys. We have Courtney Escobar and Hannah Unchak here to also answer questions. Why don't you guys come right on up? Yeah.
All three of us.
Yeah. Just move the microphone as necessary. I did send this information out. This is the same as I sent out by email if anyone would like paper copies. We're here. Okay. And what you'll find in that packet, again, that's the same as I sent out by email last week, is an excerpt from our drafting manual concerning the writing of these bills. And then most of this is also excerpted from the manual in the appendices, which are examples of commissions and committees and things like that. So this is what guides us in the drafting of these entities. Why don't you
Sure.
hand it over to Courtney,
Sure. Hand
as
it along, you jump up here too.
the front line, one of the front line dealing with members coming in.
So my name's Courtney Eschbach. I'm one of the drafting attorneys in the Office of Legislative Services. I've been in there for 18 years. Study committees, usually what happens is a member will come in and request a study committee or a study commission. We'll talk about exactly what that member wants to study. I'll give an example because I've worked on it for a few years. There's been a study committee on dog grooming regulations. And so at that point, if you think of it like a flow chart, we ask who they want to be on the committee. And if they want it to just be legislators, then great. We do, I think the standard is 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate. We come up with some duties that they want them to study. That's it. It goes into session law if it passes both houses. If they want members outside of the legislature, we have to codify it in the RSAs. And so we'll talk about sort of where's the best place for that to fit, who they want on it. Last year, a new rule or a new statute was added that the number of members who are non-legislative members cannot be greater than the number of legislative members. So several people have gotten around that by saying, well, notwithstanding that law, and then, they put as many people as they'd like. But because those commissions tend to be very short-lived, so again, taking the dog grooming as an example, you have your 10 people on the commission and you want them to report back. It doesn't make sense for them to live in the statute sort of forever and ever. So we sunset them or we prospective repeal them, usually 1 to 2 years out. And that is essentially the difference between the two and how we approach them. We always defer to the members on which one they would prefer to have, because I know some people have constituents that they want on the commissions or committees. Some people have people that they definitely want to give input into the committee. We usually do advise them they don't have to be a member to give input, but again, we recognize that every case is different. So that is essentially how we handle it. Hannah, I don't know, did I leave anything out?
So I have a base form of what a study committee looks like. So that would be, I think so, a version of a study committee. So which is going to be a session law, not codified with an RSA number. And so just going through line by line, there's establish a committee to study blank, and dog grooming regulations could be one of them. And then there's the form, 3 members of the House, 3 members of the Senate. And as you all know, that is massaged frequently, especially by the Senate. They'll usually bring it down to 1 member. And then the duties of the committee is really where the nuts and bolts of us talking to the members of what they want. Do you want them to study what the fees should be, what the training should be for dog grooming? What other states might be doing, any proposed, if they want to submit proposed legislation. And if it is a session law study committee rather than a codified commission, those duties is where we would say consult with the Veterinarians Association of the state, consult with a member of the grooming community of the state, rather than making them a voting member, which is usually what happens in a codified commission. And so we've seen many of the same ideas promoted in both ways. And it's really just up to the member which avenue they would like to go with. In essence, they are the same, except for the voting members when it comes down to it. So, yeah, we are open to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You may have said this, but are there sunset requirements on that form that they have to go through? I mean, is it required to put a sunset date?
I don't think it is required, I don't think it's required anything in statute. I can't think of anything off, but it does, when we talk about our job and our duty towards the statutes, we want to make sure that what's in the RSAs is actually what's current law. So if you put a study commission into the RSAs and it fulfills its duty, but it's still hanging out there, it's an appendix basically, right? Like it's serving no purpose. So we try as a way to keep the RSA sort of compact, readable, and understandable by the public. If it has served its purpose, if they've done their final report, then it's time for it to prospectively repeal. But there is no requirement that it do so.
And there are commissions that have existed in perpetuity, like the Commission on Native American Affairs is one of them. But there are committees in both the House and the Senate every year that will bring up a number of commissions that they know aren't meeting regularly, they are struggling to get membership, that they will ask to sunset that hadn't had a sunset provision in them. So, which is why when we meet with members, we try to counsel them on, do you want this commission to meet for 5 years? Do you think the need will be over in 5 years and put in the prospective repeal? Or do you want it to live in perpetuity? Or you put in the prospective repeal of 5 years, and then somebody can come in and amend that prospective repeal and extend it after that too. So we've seen a number of flavors, but there are a number of commissions that have been around for 20 plus years that have existed in perpetuity.
Okay, thank you. You have a question?
Yes, yes, in the XM, is it in the packet?
No, because it's part of the computer program, the software, so it's not, yes. It's not like a PDF form, it's a different animal.
Representative Abel.
Thank you. So there are a couple of people, I think, who weren't here at the last meeting, and so I just wanted to put some context, I think, into why we were wanting you to come. And part of it is that during the drafting process, I mean, you guys are, you do the drafting, but then, the legislature, it has to go through the process, and then everybody else basically has to live with what's drafted. And so I think what we're trying to figure out is, what you have in your templates at this point, what sort of things are kind of pain points as they go through the legislative process, and then what sorts of things we could work with you on so that we understand what the template is, especially for legislators who are coming in, so they understand what they're going to be asked when they come in with a great idea. And it's not really to get into the substance of what they want studied, although we want to make sure that when they come into you, when one of the first questions they're asked, and maybe you asked this already, is, has this been studied before? Have you seen the report? And why does this not satisfy you? Because, there's really an interest in not developing as many of these as we have been, right? But anyway, that was one thing.
Sure, and that is an excellent point. But I would say, if a new member comes in, I'm actually not in a position, because I'm hearing it for the first time. I don't know if it's been studied before, and as far as I know, there's not a good, easy way to quickly pull that up while a member is sitting with me. If there was a way, that would be a great way to do that.
Well, so just, may I follow up?
Go
So
ahead.
but that's part of what we're really working on here. I think there's been a lot of work being done to try to figure out what commissions exist and have them equally available to everybody, and then just to increasingly make available through research by the member. I mean, I think our idea here is that it's not as the drafter, it's not your responsibility to do the research before they walk in the door. That's why I would say when they come in, they're like, okay, step one, if you want to do this, have you talked to OLS? Do you know that this hasn't been done before? Because you guys have a million things to do, right? So that's just also part of our understanding better of the process and what tools we can put into place to make it easier, for everybody. I mean, we did just pass this statute, and there is in that statute the 5-year repeal requirement. So, I mean, part of the thing is, I think when people come in, they don't necessarily know they know what they want to study, they don't know all the scoop. And so there's a lot of, I don't know, procedural questions that when you give the draft to them, they may not have even thought of. So we just want to make sure that the draft has as much in it to get rid of the pain points as it can. Anyway, we can talk about all of that, but, and the only other thing I want to say is I think we're really sensitive to the fact that you guys are drafting attorneys, you're not members. So,
And as you
There's-
correctly point out, when you know that we have these small windows when we're accepting
Right.
your
This is the
requests.
thing.
And most of those requests come in via email now, probably at 80, 90% at least, are via email. So that requires some back and forth sometimes, which means you have to put it aside while you're waiting for a response, which sometimes comes quite later in the process. But it's a rapid fire period that we're going through. And when we receive those requests, our goal is to turn that around and make it into a true LSR that same day, so that it doesn't carry over.
And I'm sorry, can I just clarify? And by make it into a true LSR, meaning it has a number and a title, not that it's completely drafted, because we want to make sure it's out there in public so that people are not duplicating effort.
And then as soon as, in the House, as soon as it becomes an LSR, we will batch them and put them on the website so that it helps us internally also, because we can look at that list. Because these 7 folks are handling various requests that may not know what's going on in the other cubes in the office.
Okay, thank you. As Representative Evil mentioned, and we've talked, the research that should go into the LSR, has it been studied before? What was the outcome? Who did it? When did they do it? Was it done 15 years ago? Does it need to be done again? You know, because of times change. That's one of the things that is frustrating us, because the same thing gets punched in over and over and over, and it's not your fault. It's the system. And we want to, our job is to do 2 things: kill off the ones that are dead and prevent ones that should be dead. So we're working right now on preventing bills to be drafted that they did a study 5 years ago. There was an outcome. We don't need this. And it's not your job to say so, because your job is to draft new LSRs. And you don't even know if this thing was up in Ann's back closet, where all these guys are stored. I mean, I was up there almost, she said if she saw my face, it was, oh my God. I mean, it's walls and walls and walls of bills, study commissions, committees.
And if I may,
Go ahead.
OLS research does very
Right.
much the same thing. And it would be lovely if the members would ask OLS research, has this been studied, not necessarily by a commission or committee, just by us internally, where we have provided it to members. And I know a frustration has been with House Committee Services that members will ask House Committee Services to research the very same thing that OLS has been asked. And it ends up being 2 offices doing exactly the same thing, which is obviously not a very efficient way of doing things.
Hang on just a second.
Yeah, sure.
Representative Walls.
Thank you all for being here. I have particularly appreciated in recent years how members have been encouraged to go to research or do research before coming to all of you, because I respect the fact that you shouldn't have to be doing all that. You're the drafters. We should be coming forward. And I'm going to reiterate what I've said before, orientation and also our first organizational meetings here. We should be reminding members to your research that you're not here to wait on us. You're here to take what we have and put it into some form that we can work on. So thank you very much for that. I wonder with all these commissions and committees now, you're not allowed, are you, to say, oh, well, I've heard this before, I've heard this 88 times before, or whatever. Isn't that our obligation to find out through research?
If I know, I mean, so if it's a duplicate in
I
the
know.
year, yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's a parliamentary inquiry on the,
Yeah,
it's an insight.
that's a standing joke with us.
Okay, great. No, so if it's a duplicate from this year, absolutely, I'll say, actually, someone else filed that, it's Representative Abel, you should go speak with her. If I know that it was done in the past year or so, I will actually mention it because I'll say, oh, hey, they did a commission on that, did you take a look at it? But I have to know about it. And that's part of the hard when there's 7 of us drafting, 1,200 bills, like you don't keep everyone in the front of your brain. And especially in the week or 2-week window that we have that we're taking requests, you're just kind of trying to get things into the system as quickly as you can. So, if I know, I'm absolutely going to say, oh yeah, we did something like that last year, but 9 times out of 10, I don't remember right in the moment because there's just so much going on.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Follow-
I appreciate that. I appreciate the fact that you have encouraged people to go to research because oftentimes what I've learned over the years is by just doing the research, it can answer you to help cut down on drafting an unnecessary bill. Just like when we have a bill in committee, or talking things out and getting people together to talk from the agency to the committee, problems are solved without having to pass a bill. So there's a way to cut back on the volume of drafting as well. Thank you.
No, and can I follow up to that? I mean, I'd say one thing, if I had a nickel for every time I said, have you gone to research? And the person said no, my student loans would get paid off after 18 years. It is a valuable resource. But I think the other thing is, and we're not in a position to really say this, but if there is especially a very specific question, encouraging members to just call the department. You don't need a study commission to ask the Department of Agriculture about why the fee structure for pesticides is the way it is. You really can do that research, and any of the research arms are happy to help you with that. But again, we're not in a position where we can really say, I can't do this for you. You just need to make a phone call. So anything that in the orientation, in leadership and caucus that you can do to encourage, especially new members, that, hey, be afraid to reach out and ask your questions. You'll get a better product if you talk to the people yourselves. I think that would also be very helpful.
And if I may, Representative Wall, we do try to tell at orientation. In fact, Mila's always sitting with me, and we're talking about research. But as you all know, that small orientation period for new members who have no experience, it's really drinking from a fire hose, and it's overwhelming. We try not to get too deep in the weeds, although we can do that, believe me. And it really needs to be a continuing education forum. And we had been looking at doing more, then COVID hit, and we're still kind of recovering from that. And of course, this year has been a very, very busy session for us. From the time we started drafting or taking in the requests in the fall, it's been nonstop. So it is something, I will say though, that it appears that we have more newer members requesting research right now for next year than we've seen in the past.
Wow, that's good.
Yay.
That's excellent.
That's right.
That's right. As Ann points out, orientation came after, for the new members, after the drafting, the filing period for the House this year, last year.
So I think just in terms of research, I think we're going to be working more and more to try to make better the tools for people to go online to archived studies themselves. Because and I think House Committee Services has been working on it. I mean, the more we can get that digitized. And the other thing is that I think we need to sharpen and look a little more closely on our search tools on the general court website, because I have looked, I mean, I'll look for things in every way I can think of, and I've been pretty creative, and I still won't find something that I know is there. So I think we have to do better with what we have online so that people, I mean, the other thing I can imagine is that OLS is inundated with research requests in the 2 days before is a filing period, and so, but I guess the other thing I just wanted to say is I don't think there's anybody on the committee that wants to invade your turf in particular, but I think the more we can sort of snuff out the problems that people are gonna walk in with to you guys, if we can give them a sheet and we can say, look, you're gonna be asked this, you're gonna be asked this, you're gonna be asked this, and you really should be thinking about these things when you're creating these study committees, like who is gonna be the appointing authority? What about the repeal date? What specifically do you want studied? I mean, one thing we've talked about here already is that some of these commissions they create, they put entities on them that the entities don't, from their mission, they don't want to be on them. Or they're asked like to be on 10 or 15 things that they can't possibly do. So one thing I would say is have you talked to the people you want to put on this thing? I think the real challenge is to talk people off the threshold of creating these huge commissions and having them fully appreciate that a legislative study committee can do really good work too. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, you really don't feel empowered to say to somebody, have you spoken to the department? Or have you spoken to somebody if they come in with these study ideas?
I absolutely feel empowered, but
Oh.
once they say no,
There's not.
there's nothing I can really say except, okay. So,
I mean, that's also, I think, part of the challenge.
If I may, too, I understand well the problems here, and Representative Abel, we've been working for
Yeah.
a couple of years here, and all of your staff, whether it be House staff, I know what the problems that these things have caused, and poor Deb Childs, I see those appointment emails from her on Sunday morning at 5 o'clock in the morning that she's sending out, and that's all it seems she does. I know she does an awful lot more, but those things are nonstop on the appointments to the commissions and committees. So I'm aware, and we certainly want to be part of the how to make it better. I don't know if there's a solution, but it's how to make it better. And one of the things that some of us have been talking about in our shop is to at least have some sort of flyer or something that has those sort of questions. And I don't want to jump into that at this right now, other than give it some thought, because I think this committee needs to inform whatever that document looks like when we have it available for members.
I think your checklist ideas.
Yeah, we were, idea to be part of the proactive, how to do this the right way, that you don't need commissions, is to have, for orientation, to have a check sheet. That when you want to have an LSR drafted, these are the steps that you should be taking. Did you do your house research? Did you do your OLS research? Has this been a commission before? When was it a committee? It answers the questions. Before you go to you with an idea, have you walked this road before? So, Jim, or excuse me, Representative Kofal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the other challenge I think that we're dealing with is that committees, commissions, et cetera, are an effective way to gently kill a bill, or to gently redirect a bill to, in a way that doesn't hurt feelings as badly as just killing it. And so I guess I'm curious, first of all, to what extent is this a problem with the initial drafting process versus to what extent is this a problem with the amendment process? If we have a checklist, it needs to be an amendment checklist as well, because I think that's where a lot of this stuff comes up.
I
Yeah,
agree.
it does. And you know, the political part of it is something I think we're not gonna be able to really tackle, but our job will be to, you know, dampen the enthusiasm for creating, I mean, I honestly, I think the statutory commissions are the ones that are the most difficult for staff, for management, you know, administratively and everything. I have less of a problem with the study committees just because they go fast, they're
Yeah, they
targeted.
automatically
and-
sunset.
Yeah. But I mean, I just made and these are things you guys all talk about, like, make sure that the terms of office for the people appointed are very clearly delineated, right? And I know in our statute that we just passed, and I didn't see that referenced, but in your worksheets here, but I'm sure that, you know.
It has not, that section has not been updated to reflect that, but we are keenly aware of it.
Yeah, but it's like sometimes a representative might be appointed to something, but not in their representative status. And so it's not coterm, you know, I mean, I've just sat on commissions where people are really confused about their term of office. And I think we'll be able to correct that going forward, but just going backward. I mean, speaking for myself personally, I'd really like to see in the template and then in what comes out for commissions that the House and Senate standing committees that are responsible for the jurisdiction always will get a copy of the report. I mean, now we say that the governor and the, you know, and the clerks and the library get them. I think the other point of this committee is to make sure that the people that need to get these reports are getting them. And part of that is the standing committees. I mean, maybe leg admin should always get them so that you have them. And then this whole thing about make sure each appointee has an appointing authority. We just passed a bill, I think, last week that there are no appointing authorities for a couple of the people that are in the bill. And then what I just said, does your entity want to participate? You know, and then things that I think representatives have to be sensitive is lobbyists really pushing for commissions versus study committees. That's not really your domain. And then things that I've heard from people is what do you want in a report? A lot of these things, it just says you have to report by November 1st, but it's not like clear what a representative thinks should be in the report.
no
And
checklist.
sometimes people are floundering. Who is the convening authority? Is it the legislature or is it an agency? And the other thing I've heard is people are having agencies convene them because they want it to happen, but that costs the agencies money. And the other thing for me is that I think that if it's a Senate bill, the Senate has to staff the things and not the House.
Mhm.
And I saw one of your samples here, which I liked a lot. It said right in there, it was a Senate bill, and it said, a senator shall be the first named member.
So Representative Abel, in our template, it actually says that the first meeting shall be called by the first named. And if it's a House committee, it is the first named House member.
Right.
And if it's a Senate committee, it is the first named Senate member. So I'm not quite sure where this committee or commission is that a department is convening it. The only way that that usually happens is if the member themselves asks, oh no, I want
And
this
and
to
they have-
happen.
Yeah.
So I wanted to clarify, like, that is already part and
I've done
parcel
it
of what we're
myself,
doing.
That's why I know.
Okay, great. But the one other thing that I would say is all of this education is great. But we had a portal, around the time of orientation that had lots of educational, videos and documents and things on it. I actually pointed several members to it when they would ask questions, and that those educational materials are only so good in so far as people are using them. And that's where I think it's important, again, for leadership, for the caucuses, for the older members to really, really hit home, like you need to use these resources put them out and available as much as possible instead of just relying on orientation which is drinking out of a fire hose, and relying on orientation to say, hey, here's how you do things. Okay, great. Have a great session. So I don't know. We're not in a position to really tell you how to do that, but I just do think, repetition is key. So anything you can do to keep hitting these points with your members of, here's your checklist, because, oh, he left. Representative Copal has a great point that there are kind of these life cycles of, okay, they all come in during filing, and then we get to crossover, and there's definitely a larger number of, I want to try and save my bill, or we're going to kill it gently, or whatever it is. The politics, we don't really ask. But there is a large number of conversions right before crossover, and then again right before the end of the year. So making sure that checklist is always kind of floating around in the ether for members, I think would be very helpful.
Representative Rumbo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think to the extent we come up with a checklist, it seems like orientation, obviously, but there are many returning members who are not going to orientation at that point, or whom we never have it was never communicated to them. So it seems like it either needs to be, I don't know if it would be the speaker that electronically disseminating it to the whole house, or tasking committee chairs with, when you're voting, so we're gonna have handing them the form the same way that we have to do blurbs or for the calendar or anything like that. It seems like something we could try to communicate through some different avenues. Yeah, because I think you're right. Orientation, new people are too new to even know what they don't know, and then other people are not necessarily gonna be back in that space.
Well, and it's been exacerbated in that 4 years ago with COVID, the system got blown out of the water. And then now we're in the second cycle after that, where we have new members that haven't seen the place hum the way it used to. And so that's, with the turnover that we have, that's over half the members of the House that have not experienced things running the way they should be with the institutional memory that members once had. And we see that as a problem in the way members are requesting or dealing with LSRs, amendments, and the like. It's our end of the process, we're seeing a lot of that. And we have to inform the members of how certain things are supposed to work.
Maybe Representative Ebel kind of answered this, but am I correct that if you were to go onto the general court website to do a search the way we do for RSAs or for SRs, we could not just do a search for a keyword for a study committee that may have existed at some point?
You can, but it just doesn't work that
Okay.
smoothly.
Because that seems like obviously the easiest way to weed out for people
Right.
to do
I
their
think
own work.
There's an
but-
IT piece to this,
Mhm.
huge.
Yeah.
Okay, Representative Wall?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again. I think we're all pretty much on the same page here. I think the one step forward we've come to so far today is that we need a brochure or handout of some kind. If we don't actually have continuing education, and actually the problem with continuing education, as much as I believe in it, the people who should show up don't. So if we have a handout of some sort in every single mail slot and reminding people the process to follow, what you can do, what you should do, and what you should not do, I think that's the biggest thing we can do. It's very difficult to navigate our website in some instances, and a lot of people just give up. So if we have a handout, there's a lot to be said still for paper. So I'm with you on that. Thank you.
Okay. Representative?
Well, I mean, I think this is a conversation.
is.
So,
This is.
sorry.
Yeah, it's fine.
I guess the other thing I wanted to emphasize is that we're also going to be working on something to give to committee chairs with a lot of the same, perhaps, questions, so that, they go through your process, but a lot of the ways that they test the issues within the committee as to whether to create a study committee or not. The committees will be going through the same. I mean, I just think this checklist idea where everybody's sort of on the same wavelength on what is going to be needed in these things is really helpful. And I just, you know, there is just this thing when speakers, when there is a transfer of power, things get lost. And I think that the more that we could really establish solid policy that exists, regardless of who is in the speaker's office, that this is like the way you do these things, it'll all be to the good. And I mean, it's great if we can all just keep talking and then, you know, sort of smooth out the process. And in the long term, the goal is to do the best study committees we can, get useful information, and, but decrease staff and legislative time to the extent possible.
If I may, on that point, a great example of that was the, what is it, RSA 1449, that has the majority legislative members cap. And as you all have seen, the creative way to get around that is the notwithstanding 1449, you do whatever you want. So we've been talking in the office, how do we encourage people to follow the statutes that they themselves have passed? And House rules is one place where we can say, well, in the House rules that you agreed to on organization day, that's how we get around duplicate filings in the first instance. So maybe an avenue, as well as the continuing education and reminding committee chairs, is coming up with a House rule about commissions or committees in whatever way you all see fit. I mean, you've seen it all. You've seen the creative ways and maybe different delineations you'd like to make on what's acceptable and not acceptable. But rules is another avenue where we can say no, and we don't get to say no very often, or at least we get to say no, and then they come back and they're like, but I want to do it anyway, and we do what you all want to do usually. So rules is a great way for us to say, well, you all agreed in organization day that this is how you want to proceed, and then in order to overturn a rule, you need 2/3 majority. So.
Okay.
And I do exercise that. I have the ability to say no to duplicative bills or those that are substantially similar. And I will do that several times during the filing period. And it takes some doing, because I've got to look into the LSR cards and say, it may have the same title, but essentially the same title, but it may be two very different things, or it may have two different titles and be essentially the same thing. So it takes some doing to understand that, because I'm only at that point only looking at what the concept is that the member brought in. And these folks will come back to me if Courtney has two bills that had a different title, but they are in fact the same, and she'll let me know, and I'll look into it, and I'll send that communication out saying, sorry, sorry, I can't allow that in. And then the member can go to the speaker for appeal my
I was going to
decision.
say,
to the
how is
speaker.
that resolved? So first of all, usually filings are private, but if you see something duplicative, then how does that?
I will tell the members. I will work with the first one that came in as being the one that lives. The second one, I will talk to the member and say, I can't allow that, and I'll cite the House rule, and then it can be appealed to the speaker in the case of the House bills. And then I will always refer them to the House Clerk's office for anything else regarding rules.
Okay. Anything else on this subject? Anybody else?
Well, of course, me, but anyway. I mean, the only thing I would say about rules, I think that's a really, really good idea, but in any given term, you re-adopt the rules, right? But as soon as, I mean, if we can just get them, like, so they're standard. I mean, the other challenge that I think we will have is this obviously isn't a joint committee, it's a House committee. So, you know, we'll have to sort of work with the Senate and try to work that out. I mean, who could develop a checklist for us to start with? Us? I don't know. I mean, it
we
might
could-
be,
We could get ideas from you and from Ann
yeah, I
to
mean,
come up with a checklist, and we now have
right.
a committee clerk who can gather these guys.
Right. I mean, I don't know, I'm looking at Ann, I mean, would you just want to do sort of a running Q&A kind of thing, or? Yeah, I mean, I mean, that would be fantastic. And then, I mean, the more that's disseminated, the better. And I think, you know, if members are leaned on from all different sides, hopefully we'll come to a good resolution. But you're right, I mean, the education in the front part is just
Yeah,
really.
be proactive.
Well, and Dave, Mr. Alacoons had a really good point. I mean, in the House, we have at least a third turnover practically every term. So it's almost like you have, so the more standardized we can make this, the better.
And we certainly need to be working this together. I don't want to get out ahead of
No, this is.
this group. Maybe you're the center of this whole operation right now, and we're kind of the
So we'll
spokes
just
on the
share
side.
lists.
This may inform what you would already be doing if you're drafting a checklist for us, but I know you referenced the sort of the computer program that you have to do fields, drop downs, whatever it is. Would it be possible or would it be useful for us to get screenshots of those? I mean, I know you can't print it out for us because it's not documented, but if we could see what you have to fill out, does that make sense? I mean, because it would sort of no, when they're drafting, Mr. Alconis was saying like he's, you know, got a program, so that's why he couldn't print it for the paper, but if we could see what information you have to input.
I mean, we can print off a blank, I'm gonna, yeah, it looks like this. right?
Okay.
The gray fields are where we fill stuff in. So I mean, we can definitely get you a copy of that.
I think it'd just be helpful to see what isn't there in a way,
Yeah.
right? Or help us think about what isn't there.
So what you see on that, the gray, again, that's the fillable
Exactly.
part, and the rest is the boilerplate. That's
And we can change the boilerplate,
Go
like a
back.
great example is how we always change it from 3 senators to 1, you know?
So maybe there isn't.
Yeah.
Which one is that you were?
That's-
It's not.
that is
in
not
there.
in that.
So if you pull up any study committee that you've seen that isn't codified, the avenues available for us to fill that are standard are what are you studying and what are your duties?
So like
Those-
section 1 and section 3 generally. So-
And we can change everything else, but the things that we're prompted to ask, bare minimum, what do you want to study? Really, just what do you want to study? It's set in 2 different ways.
Right.
And
And
it
it's,
has a quorum, it tells us when the report is.
It tells who the reports go to, but especially since you want it to go to the standing committees, that would be
Yeah.
something.
but
that
I
would-
think
yeah.
that's exactly what, I mean, because we're not going to be talking about the substantive matter so much. We're going to be looking at the blanks that you fill in, so,
Yeah.
so that we're sort of all on the same wavelength. I mean, the other thing we should be talking about is, you know, when are the effective dates of these committees? Because a lot of times with the commissions, they'll say they want to meet in 30 days or they want to meet in 45 days. And, you know, honestly, that's just kind of unreasonable if you have a 40-person commission trying to get all your appointments and then they have trouble getting a quorum.
That is always up to the sponsor because that is not part of the boilerplate. The boilerplate is it's effective upon passage, and there's that the first meeting is called by the first named, in your case, House member. So we will have members who are anxious to get started on studying something, who do want it to be 30 days after passage or whatever. And again, sort of, you know, we can't say no, that's crazy. So we put it in and we may advise and say, okay, well, you know, you've got a lot of people here. Are you sure you want to do that? And I mean, you know, your colleagues, they say, damn the torpedoes, and you do what they say.
So it's a question you ask, you don't just like spit out the form and it has 45 days in it.
No,
or
there are no
whatever.
days. The format says that the first named, in your case, House member, if it were a Senate sponsored, be the first named Senate member calls the hearing. I'm sorry, it does say first within 45 days. Never mind.
That's what I thought.
So,
Because I mean, I've seen a lot come out and they say 45
yeah,
days.
so
I mean, a lot of commissions have the governor appointing somebody and, you know, that can be the longest time lag on earth and.
right. So I'm sorry. So it is 45 days in there, but the first meeting is called, and I don't know that, especially how you do the quorum, it doesn't necessarily mean everybody's been appointed yet.
Yeah,
How about
and that's the problem.
So,
And one of the things to consider in the timeline, to an extent, when people want to get going right away on some of these things, is that it takes a while for bills to get up to the governor's office.
Yeah, that's the
And at
thing.
the, a lot, and even on New Hampshire
Yes, I
Public
know.
Radio last year, I was screaming at the radio in the car when the report said, well, it's, this particular bill has now passed both houses. It's on its way to the governor's office and he has to sign it by, no, because.
I mean, it can be August.
And exactly.
I just did this.
Exactly, Representative. We had, at the end of the session, when we're done on the 29th or whatever it is, and all of the bills that have been adopted by both houses, and they come back to us for enrollment, it will take us a month to get through those, to make sure that they are in correct form. We double check everything in every bill before we send it up for enrollment. So then it goes to the Secretary of State's office, but then it's still not presented to the governor because there are other steps involved. So it's, I deal with members every session saying, well, why haven't we heard about that in the governor's office? Well, it hasn't got there yet because there's a lot to do between that final day of session and it getting to the governor's office.
Well, and the other thing is the report date. I've seen bills come through where they want the report by September.
Yeah.
of-
Yeah.
And I'm
And
like,
no-
you're
November
lucky
is
if
the-
you've convened by then.
Right.
Yeah.
November
Exactly.
1st is the default, and that is
Right.
in the template. But again, we'll have members who come in and they're like raring to go. So, in fact, I think I just did one in the past couple days where it was change it to September, and it was like, okay, you know.
And the Senate has asked in the past that the report date be December. And so, you know.
I mean,
it's-
December isn't bad, but September is insane.
House rules though?
Yeah,
Wasn't that the problem?
having it
Oh.
be in December goes against House rules,
Oh.
statute. And also, I mean, you run into the same issue this year where you might, or, yeah, that you would run into this year. If you have a committee that's meeting and their final report is due in November, but filing was in September, so you've got this odd crossover. And so maybe you tack on an amendment to something that exists because you're anticipating the report, but then the Senate could, there's a whole lot of like date jockeying. And half the time it's, you know, just du jour. What does the member choose? If they heard from a lobbyist, what does the lobbyist want? And we're at the beck and call of that.
Okay, thank you. The second part of our charter is to get rid of obsolete, not meeting committees, commissions, et cetera. You're part of the mission and Ann is part of that mission. Now, you guys can sit back if you want, or just stay up there. It's up to you. I was talking to a couple of the members, both last week and this week. Is there a listing of committees and commissions, when they meet, and when is the last time they met? Is there a listing anywhere? That may be you, or maybe
That's
Ann.
not a question for us.
Right.
Would you like to
That's why I said you could step back if you wanted to. Because we're looking, as my compatriot reminded me today, that is the primary mission for us to do, is to get rid of old, archaic, useless, dead, dying committees and commissions that haven't done anything and they're still sitting on the books. And like I said, Ann showed me the closet. Well, it's the size of 2 bedrooms, that where all these things are, and some of them obviously are still in effect. So is there this listing? Ann, it's all yours.
Thanks, Representative Patusek. For the record, I'm Ann Fitzgerald, Director of House Community Services. I have Jennifer Four, who's our Assistant Director here as well. And as you guys see, we've been with you through this entire time. So in any event, yes, that is what Deborah Childs, our Deputy Chief of Staff, is working on and has been working on since the day she walked in here 3 years ago. And we have worked on it with her as well, to update this master list. What we have done is, historically, Pam Smarling, who's been one of our researchers here for over 30 years, staffed Representative Ebel's last 2 committees on commissions, as well as the one in 2010. So Pam, for all the years she was here, maintained a master list, but then Speaker's Office maintained a list, and other offices did. So what Deborah has done, as our deputy chief has, and also as the person in charge of making all the speakers' appointments to all these different entities, has brought us all together to create a master list that will be maintained with IT, but we're in the process of still developing that. And so right now, as you've mentioned, Deborah's appointments come through at 5 a.m. She is working on a daily basis, making appointments to those over 200 commissions that exist. And what Representative Ebel had done, as we did also in the 2010 Committee on Commissions, is to examine all of those. Correct, Representative Ebel? You had a questionnaire that was sent to all of those entities that existed and said, when are you meeting? What are you doing? And you were able to get rid of a good number, 60 something, correct?
Quite a few.
And so now so what Deborah's doing is we're all these different offices are helping her with this, the clerk's office, House Community Services, and IT, to combine this final list for all of you, but it is taking time, as you know, because we're in the middle of the session trying to put this all together. So we are in the process of doing that. We did, and I will check with Deborah. She's had at least 6 meetings with IT to create this system. And as you saw when we did our first meeting with all of you, and we did the presentation on all the aspects of what we do, she had been coordinating all of that as well. So I will check with Deborah on the timeline as we can get this, at least a draft to you so you can see. But sometimes she is also in the process. In fact, I just talked with her this morning that she is contacting some of those groups on her own, saying, well, when is the last time you met? Because some of these groups have finished their work and they don't have a repeal. And they may want to put in legislation to create a repeal. So we will get that number to you as soon as possible, or that list, I should
Yeah,
say.
that would be great. It gives us something to start with, like, because obviously there's committees and commissions that are sitting out there. They haven't met. They're supposed to meet, every 3 months. They haven't met in 2 years. We can call them and say, you want to be active? What are you doing? Give
Exactly.
us this, and we can make a list of those and start getting these folks in here and say, this is the list.
Well, that number may be smaller than you think because of all the work that Representative Ebel's group, because the last one was just in 2021, correct? 2022?
Right, I mean, so we had every single agency come in, and we reviewed every single statutory commission associated with those agencies. And we did it over a period of a year. And so we just kind of went through the whole filtering out process. So as Ann said, there's probably fewer of them than you might think. So last meeting, what we sort of agreed was that our first task, what we would try to do is tackle the template idea first, because we have another filing period coming up in September. So to the extent that we could help build the tools here first to try to dampen things down in the future, because we just did all the other review work, then maybe we could turn to that. Just as far as being useful. But the other thing is, in our statute, that we just passed, every February 15th, and I know it may take a while to get there, but every January 15th, we're supposed to have the compendium prepared of all the statutory commissions that exist, so that tool is available to everybody. And so I know you guys are working on that. I had talked to a couple of people. One of the problems, I think, is figuring out when these commissions are meeting, because not all of them are noticed in our calendar. A lot of them are. But I was hoping maybe in working with IT, some of this information would be automatically populated in your compendium, so that, like, Pam and Deborah didn't always have to be calling to see when they had met last.
That is part of the plan. in creating this, as Representative Ebel just referred to it, the compendium of where all these groups are meeting. And as Dave referenced, it was much easier before COVID to figure it out. After COVID, we had a special, the Senate President and the Speaker at the time came up with a special plan that all of the commissions needed to be housed by the agencies because our staff was trying to support the standing committees at that time. And that did work out. And then we haven't transferred back in, so we don't have and as we all know, we now have the double rooms, so we don't have as many meeting spaces as we once had upstairs for these study commissions. And some of the goals, when the study commissions are created, as you know, it's to get the agency to start looking at something. So it makes sense that the staff of an agency, they are the experts to work with these commissions. So that has evolved as well. So it's what I always tell people, you know, we have the pre-COVID, the COVID, and the post-COVID, and we're trying to combine all of that together, and we're still in this huge learning curve. I remember when Representative Ebel came up, remember that day, January 15th? Yeah, and how's that report? I just stared at her. Well, actually, I think it'd be more like a meltdown.
That was
but-
delicate. Well, because we were
But-
trying to figure out appointment stuff, and so I just wondered whether it'd been done. I mean, the other thing I would say is to throw some responsibility on the people who belong to these commissions and even the agencies to say, hey, look, this thing has run its course. I mean, and not just keep, you know, I don't know, just realize that you haven't met, you know, I don't know, if I was appointed to something, or maybe if people are appointed to something and it doesn't meet for 6 months, maybe flag it to the speaker's office.
So I
I
think
think
what we
there's
can
gotta be a
do, as soon as we can, when Deborah's going to be meeting with Jennifer and I this week, and we're going to look at this, and we will get that list. If we don't get the entire massive flow chart to you, we certainly will get those that have not met. So you will have that list. And if you look in your binder, you will see the reports from Representative Ebel, and you'll see in the report the questionnaires that were created for these different commissions to ask them, when have you met, what have you done? And that might be something you might want to consider, is creating something like that again for those leftovers that never, we never get an answer from the last study. And so we will see where that is. And also in your binder, you will have a list of current studies that are being created right now, and the breakdowns according is listed by committee. So that's something for you to see what we're creating right now to add to our list. But I wouldn't be surprised if there may be only 10 or 20, 20 might be too high, maybe 10 commissions out there that have not met.
Well, and I was just gonna say, what we found when we were going through the other committee on committees processes, it's not always a good test whether they have met or not, because some only are convened under very special circumstances. Yeah, I mean, they perform a specific function. So, I mean, there's all ways of looking at it. So I think we're gonna have two, like, we wanna have a really well or easy to research archive of existing study committee reports, and then an easy to access list of the commissions that exist, right? So we've got two things going on here.
So, and I think what Representative Ebel said is, she said the last one took about a year. It is a slower process than you might think, because we want to do this right. So instead of creating little lists here and there, we're trying to create that master so that we can all have access
Yeah.
to it, and that it's integrated within our electronic system so everyone can look. So Courtney can just look up, there were 3 studies on SAUs in the last 5 years, and here's the 4th. I remember one of the biggest ones we had was on maybe about 15 years ago. We had a civics study, House Education. It was it was a statutory that was 2 years long, and it was an outstanding study because, as Representative Ebel said, a lot of these commissions they're really worth it. Yes, if you have the right combination and the right chair, you can do a great job of a study. And this this was an outstanding study, and the Department of Ed worked with it, and all different schools throughout the state. And then after they were so proud of their product and the report was out and everybody was very happy, and then the next filing period, 2 new civics bills came in, and the freshmen had no idea the study had just been completed. But that also helps when you have, as we've mentioned, if the chairs get the reports, then they can ask, if the bill for a study comes before them, they can ask the sponsor, well, are you aware of these studies? And that will help. But so if we have these, a suggestion for OLS, if they have not guidelines, but questions that they can ask the sponsors, and then if it goes through that level, then it gets to the standing committee, then you can be asked again. And it's just what I've said before, no one, all the staff wants to do the work. That's what our job is. We love our job, or we wouldn't be here as long as we've been here. And the issue is the vehicle that we're using. Sometimes commissions can be unwieldy, as Representative Ebel and Representative Petusic has mentioned. Often getting the appointments. As we know, there was a Senate bill that just went through Ways and Means, and there's no appointing authority for 3 or 4 of the appointments to be made. And how do you, it's going to be up to the clerk's office to start calling around, calling different groups, trying to find people who are willing to serve. And that takes a lot of staff time. When if you have these other procedures in place, it just would make more sense.
Well, and, I think that, I don't want to be Pollyanna or whatever, but the real goal here is to produce studies that are used and useful, because they can be so good. And in many cases, they're the generators of really good legislation looking ahead and to do good for our state. I mean, one of my concerns is that we not kill off studies that could be generating really, really good information. You just want to, I don't know, you just want to fine tune the process so we get the information to the people that need it, and everybody gets to use the really good stuff that comes out. And I mean, I think that's, I don't want to get so mired in details that we don't lose sight of that ultimate goal.
I think what you just said, Representative Ebel, is really key to the whole conversation in terms of fine tuning, because that is what was on my mind with the IT piece also, is that a good 75, 85%, I'm not sure, I don't have an exact figure, of the dockets are in there. Yes, you have to be able to find them, which can be a challenge, but it's really, that small percentage of entities that don't docket with us, that don't schedule in the House calendar, that we don't have their information. And so it's having that 100% complete list that is so challenging. So a lot of that infrastructure is in place, but it needs to go to the next level, and it needs to be 100% complete. So we have a lot of the pieces, but a lot of it is an exercise in fine tuning, because we want to be at that next 100% level.
Well, isn't that saying the last 10% takes
Yes.
90% of the time?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I'd be happy with 90, it's just, but.
And Jen just reminded me, one other item I want to mention, which we talked about at our first meeting, is that these study commissions, there's no oversight at any level. So we had one study commission where the chairman just asked a member of the audience to write the final report. So none of the commission members participated, and they had no idea that we have designed a template and the process of how things are, how we circulate their final reports to all of the named entities within the legislation. And when, thankfully, another member was on that commission and came to me and let me know about it, so I reached out to this outside person I found through an agency who was great. They sent me something. It was a beautiful booklet, all in full color, but I had to explain to me, you really should have the bill number, the chapter number, the RSA. You need all of this referenced. But it was just a gentleman who was sitting in the audience, and the chair said, would you be willing to write the report? Because he had shown up at every meeting. But there's no one to say, we don't have that infrastructure to say this is our process, because once they are created, as Jen said, they have no reason to come back to us for any kind of assistance
It's the wild,
by the
wild west.
legislature. Yes.
But I mean, I think that's part of our job too, is to sort of put, I mean, and I think you guys do have something that you give first name members on, but really like beef that up. And then, I mean, I think we put the best infrastructure in place that we can, and there are gonna be people who are far less organized than other people, or less experienced, and it's not, you know, that just has to be managed on a personality by personality basis, but for the most part, you should have, you know, we should try to have the infrastructure in place so that you can do your jobs.
Yes, and this is the first time with the creation of this committee, this is the first time that we have this overall look at the entire process beyond just looking at the legislation, excuse me, at the study committees that need to be examined or commissions to see if they're meeting. This is looking at the whole process and bringing all the offices together. And that's really important. And I think that this is one of the most important pieces that you will be working on because it'll affect all of us
And then the
for a long
clerk has
time.
a role too.
Yes.
Thank you. Just an observation from my viewpoint. I was on a commission. It was a good commission, the Alcohol Tourism Commission, a couple of years ago. And we had great meetings, we had great people, everybody from all the alcohol industries, including the Liquor Commission, and 3 people from Commerce, had a senator, and we had meetings, and it was November, election time, and the chair of the commission did not get reelected. There was no document written at the end. He just said, too bad.
He actually, he was told he could not do anything. He said, you no longer exist. And that's, we
But-
were all there, we saw it happen.
But
we
there
felt
was
awful.
no line of succession to
Right.
write the report. It's very fortunate that everybody in the alcohol industry took the ideas that we had that were going to be in the final report, and these bills have come through the House, through the Commerce Committee since then, and 95% of our ideas are now in the law. But there was no final report ever written. And that drove me up the wall, and my Democratic counterpart it drove us both up the wall. Because there wasn't, and everybody's going, where's the report? Where's the report? And we go, the chairman never wrote the report.
Well, that does happen, Representative Patusek, when you cross over. That's why that November 1 deadline has always been suggested. Because if you moved past an election, they're no longer here, or if you miss that deadline, it no longer exists. And we've had members, or you don't get a quorum by then. Representative McConkey spent 1.5 years trying to get a quorum, and he never did he?
Was it on
No,
the
I don't think
dock
he did.
bill?
Doc Bill. And he just kept calling and calling, and he was just, he could not meet. And then we've had, what we do is when the members cannot get a quorum and they're past the deadline for their report, we have a letter that they just write a letter. I never was able to get a quorum, or for whatever reason, and this is my final report. There is no report.
Thank you, Ann.
You're welcome.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just gonna say, that's another good question though, for people that wanna, do these things. What do you plan to use with the result? What
Yeah.
is your ultimate goal with,
Yeah.
do you plan to introduce legislation? I mean, why are you I
Yeah.
mean, it seems obvious in
Answer
a
why.
way, but you know, that might,
Yeah.
well, and then the committees will have a huge role in sort of vetting all these things too, but.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I think we definitely dug into the depths where we needed to dig, and we got some information, and we're basically waiting with bated breath for that compendium of committees and commissions. So is there any other business to come before this
I have a
committee?
a question
Yes,
actually
Representative.
for, thank you so much for Representative Wall and well, could you just like update us on this, is it Senate Bill 84, which is on the commissions?
Yeah,
There's
so,
another bill.
the plan of, Ledge Admin on SB 84 is we're gonna retain that. And, we created a subcommittee, so the subcommittee will take what we do here and put it into SB 84.
Excellent.
I fully agree with what was just said. We need to get moving on getting something done. We've been given a load of information even today. We already have some concept of legislation we'll be needing to file in terms of the bills, the commissions rather, and committees that have been set up. If we can get a list of what's functioning, what's not, we need to get right down to work on figuring where we can go with that. We have a whole host of things we need to be working on, so I think we need to single out what we're going to do first and move forward on that. I would like very much for us to get that list of, if we can, as soon as possible, as to which commissions are meeting and which ones are not, and see where we can go with that. What do you think?
I think,
I mean-
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, I think that's good. I still say that I think the thing that we really, really need to do is figure out our policies for people that are going to be trying to form these things in
Yeah,
September.
we have two,
Yeah.
and they really do go together. But we're being proactive on one and reactive on the other. And right now,
I just have one other question, and I don't even know if this is possible. But to put in the bill, SB 84, is there something that we could say if a committee or commission hasn't filed a report in the last 3 years or met in the last 3 years, they're going to automatically be repealed?
yes, we can. I'm pretty sure we could. I'm getting a lot of from senior staff here saying, yes, we can do that. And that'd be an excellent idea.
I mean, the only thing I would say is that if you, I mean, I know there are many commissions, they have a repeal date built in. So,
Well,
I mean, they might, yeah.
the
So
new
you just
ones
have to-
going forward after
Yeah.
last
so-
1296, was it? that
Yeah,
we-
so they should, they'd have a 5-year repeal date. I mean, it kind of depends on what they have in, but for the other ones, yeah, I get it. Depending on what their responsibilities are. I mean, that's
Or
the
like
other
you said,
thing.
that there's some that have to stay in because they meet
Right,
periodically.
and so they're not gonna have I mean, there are commissions that review issues that are less study and more oversight. Do you know what I mean? So they don't issue reports as part of their charge. But if they are supposed to issue reports as part of their charge and they haven't, then, because they're obviously not doing their jobs,
Right.
right? I mean, that's another way.
Okay.
Have we missed
Okay.
anything, you guys?
We good? Representative Doucette.
Just want to offer this up peripherally, something we probably don't talk enough about, and it's not specific to writing legislation or having an issue. We need to do a better job, no matter what side of the aisle, no matter what side of the wall we're on. The cultural component, and Representative Colfault spoke to it, about not hurting somebody's feelings, about keeping their bill alive. We need to message this correctly. We can't be spending every 6 years putting together a committee like this to address commissions and committees that shouldn't have necessarily been, and there's some great, like was spoken about, but we need to do a better job collectively and globally in the State House of looking at this and making the decisions, not to just perpetuate what could be legislation that gets killed off. Let's just call out the elephant in the room here.
Yes, Representative.
I think that we'll probably need significant leadership from committee chairs, right, or significant direction from committee chairs in that front, because I think it's, I know that's, the messaging of that, I guess, probably had its own challenges, but I think Representative Sheehan's point about building in the repeal date seems like the most straightforward, best way we could weed out a lot. I mean, that would just be a default then, and if you could put in a carve out for some sort of appeal process, if there are committees that, for whatever reason, aren't meeting, but there's a purpose for them to, you know, that they can justify continuing to exist, but they would just go away under that sort of legislation, right? Otherwise?
I think in the new statute, we've got a 5.
Well, the 5 year, that's
year
right.
built in.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
You're talking about SB 84, I guess.
Speaking briefly to that, I'd love to see that, the set in law contingent repeals or saying that these things were repealed if they haven't met, that's essentially a contingent repeal, are very difficult for us to deal with on the end when it comes to revising the code. Now, we don't do that, our publisher does that. But we will get questions from the publisher, we got probably 20 pages this year. What about this, not commission necessarily, but some other program that was contingently repealed or sunset? And we can't necessarily answer unless we do some additional research. Many programs are also prospectively sunset unless a commissioner certifies that XYZ is done. And usually that in the law, it says that I'm supposed to get a copy of that certification, but very frequently do not. I can tell you in the past 6 years, I've probably gotten 2 letters of certification regarding something like that, when every session we have that language put into a bill. So those sort of things that have contingencies are very difficult on the back end, making sure that the code is updated correctly, because we do not, in our office, get that information. So I would advocate for something in the bill itself, in the law itself, having that repeal would be much more preferable.
Thank you. Thank you again. Yes, and I think it's really imperative that every chairman of every committee and every ranking member of every committee get ready to instruct our fellow committee members what should and shouldn't be done prior to filing, because it's coming up in September, right? Even if we don't have that little brochure or whatever we're looking for, the handout, we should all be on the same page in terms of what can be filed, what should be filed. If we're having a commission or a committee, yeah, we should have a stated purpose, a really definite purpose for why they're meeting. Be very careful who we have appointed to that commission or committee. I still don't want to drag people in from the departments and agencies except to come and give information, not to be members of those commissions and such. I have a sunset provision if need be, but give them a specific framework in which to work. And I think that our members will appreciate being enlightened and updated on whatever information we can give them prior to filing for next year. Thank you.
Yeah, and then the other thing is to do what Ledge Admin is doing. I mean, standing committees are empowered to do ad hoc studies of things. It doesn't always have to be a study committee. I mean, it's hard because everybody's busy, but you don't, if a committee really wants to study something, maybe one of the things the chair asks right off the bat is, shall we study it ourselves? Because 9 times out of 10, if it's on a certain subject area, a lot of the reps who are assigned to a study committee are going to come from the particular committee anyway. Like a landfill committee or something will come from E&A, just to pick a name.
Yeah, Commerce
And
does
I
that a
agree
lot.
that.
We have,
um,
we have the different
Yeah, you have
insurance committees,
subcommittee, right?
and we have subcommittees, and we charge, like the insurance department, to do this. Don't set up a subcommittee, we charge them to do this, and come back and talk to us. Done.
And different committees have different cultures.
Yeah.
Right, so
They
that's how
They
you
should
do.
take lessons from John Hart.
Yeah.
And Karen, I agree. In our paperwork, it says Ledge Admin, for example, can set up an ad hoc committee or 2 or 3 or whatever is necessary. It's a small committee though, for studying certain things, but there's a limit as to what you can ask members to do as well. So it all keeps going back to the original filing, the purposes, the restrictions, if you might say, or the guidance, what these commissions and committees need, and get on with it. You know, set deadlines. Just do this, and what you can't do, we can resubmit to continue that process. But at the same time, if they know that there's a timeline in which to get something done, I think people often really try very hard to accomplish that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. It's been a great meeting. I think we got some ideas to go forward. And we'll see you in 1 week at 1300 hours.
Okay.
Eastern Daylight Savings Time.
Yeah.